Hello. Today I would like to make a topic about the Moors of Europe and Africa. So who were the Moors? The Moors were people who are said to originate from North Africa, West Africa, and Arabia. If you look in most modern history books, they associate them with being Arabic, Arabian, and Muslims. That's only half of the truth. In truth, Moors were Christian, they were Jewish, and they were also Muslim, and they came in all different looks. There were some that were more Caucasian looking, some who were dark, very dark, some who were in the middle, some who were mulatto looking, some were Asian, because depending on where they spread and where they set up shop, etc., etc. Now, if you want to trace the history of the Moors, you can use Islam. That's one. Anything. The inception of Islam began with the Moors. If you want to know a big chunk of Moorish history is the Iberian Peninsula, Al-Andalus, which is today Spain and Portugal. So these Moors, these Arabs and West Africans went into the Iberian Peninsula in the 700s and occupied it for 800 years. They were then expelled in 1492 by Ferdinand and Isabella, and after that is when they commissioned Christopher Columbus to go into the Western Hemisphere to the Americas. Now, on Christopher Columbus' ways to the Americas, he had some Moorish navigators with him. They first went to the Canary Islands on the west coast of Africa, then they went to the Caribbean. The first island they went to is now known as Dominican Republic and Haiti. Now, the Moors you have Moors in West Africa, from Mauritania to Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, Egypt, Sudan, the Arabians, the Arabian world, and then the southern European, the southern European nations like Italy, Greece, France, Al-Andalus, Spain, you know what I'm saying? So that's the Islamic part. You had Christian Moors who were European. Like, if you look at old heraldry from like the Holy Roman Empire, you'll see what they term as blackface today, dark features with the red lips. Anytime you see the dark features with the red lips, that is a sign of the Moors. It was not a racist thing back then. If you look at Moorish iconography and jewelry on the internet, those pieces go for thousands to tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're rare collector's items. Anything dealing with the Moors is seen as high culture. The Moorish culture was seen as a high culture, and they had the best of everything. And they were in Europe. People of African descent or people who are of darker pigment weren't just from Africa. They were in Europe. If you look at the crest of royal families, from the antiquated ones from hundreds of years ago, or coat of arms, you'll see Moors on the heraldry and paintings depicting the Moors as kings and queens and of high priests and of royalty, etc., etc. There is a picture on the internet of the Pope, the previous Pope, bowing and praying to a black Madonna with baby Jesus in her arms, black baby Jesus in her arms. The Moors set up shop in Asia, Malaysia, India, China. They went into the Silk Road. They went into the Turkic region like Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, all those, the Asian steeps, above Mongolia, and set up shop there. You have people who still refer to themselves as Moors today. Certain Moorish terms are Mori, Moris, Morisco, Moro, In the Philippines, you have a group of people called the Bangsa Moro in Mindanao. They are Moorish descent, although they are Asian. You have the Ceylon Moors in Sri Lanka. You have Moors in India, the Tamil Moors, and usually they are Islamic. But many of the Sephardim, the Sephards, which are the Jews of the Iberian Peninsula, were Moorish, which is why in 1492 they were expelled along with the Moors, and many of them fled into Africa, and many of them came to the so-called Western Hemisphere. So here's the thing: if you are of Latin descent, or if you are of African American descent, there's a strong chance that you have ancestry coming from these people, and you should know this history, especially the people from Central South America and the Caribbean islands. If you get your DNA and you see any trace of Jewish or Sephard or something like that, that comes from the Moors. And you don't know that you had a great or whatever that was Jewish, and you just happen to have it, that that is the more it's part of the Moorish blood in you. Today the Moors are amalgamated people. It's been divided and carved up. So this history is old and antiquated. Not too many people know about it, but some empires related to more. You have the Moroccan Empire, you have the Umayyad Caliphate, Almohad Caliphate, and the Almoravid Caliphate. You know what I'm saying? Those are three things you should look into. Also, if you look at old maps of the old Roman Empire, you'll see they designate the African portion as Mauritania, the west and the eastern part. Hannibal Barca was a Moor, and I'll explain. He was a Carthaginian. Carthaginian was in northeast Africa, Mauritania. Yes, he was a Roman citizen, but he was Carthaginian from the territory of Mauritania. He was a Moor. That's an example of how this history is not quite expanded upon. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of these historical figures weren't Caucasian. They were of Moorish descent. Now, many of the Greeks and the Italians have a sizable African DNA, 20 to 40%. Some of these folks, because of the traveling of the Moors. How can I say? You also have the Maroons or the Cimarrones here in the Central Caribbean. Moors who were enslaved after they lost wars. The Christian Crusades, the Islamics versus the Christian Caucasians. That was, those were a group of Moors battling the European powers, etc. But it's not that cut and dry. Some of these European powers, like I said, their royalty and their knights were of Moorish descent. So the Moorish weren't always a unified people. You had different creeds and castes and within that. You know what I'm saying? Some were Christian, some were Jews, some were Islamic, some believed this, some believed that. They didn't always get along. And, they had different foothold of powers, different families, different bloodlines. So it wasn't one big happy family. But this is, if you look at, the Holy Roman Empire, if you look at their coat of arms from previous and the statues they have in that region, you will see, what I'm saying, what I'm talking about. If you look into this, you need to do your research. So to expand upon this, many of us who are of African descent here in the North America, and those of you from Latin America, many of us are actually the same ethnicity, although we have different languages, right? We speak different languages. We grew up in different nations, but our ancestry and our blood and our DNA is pretty much the same. And I'll explain. Like, take the Jewish people of the world. You could have a Jewish person born and raised in Europe and Germany. Then you could that speaks German. You could have a Jewish person born and raised in Argentina that speaks Spanish. Yes, they're different nations. Yes, they're different cultures. Yes, they speak different languages, but they both acknowledge themselves as Jews. You know what I'm saying? Many of us are the same in this side of the world. But during the colonial times, it was a crime for lower caste people to read, specifically if you're considered black, because it was a crime punishable by death, because to learn this knowledge and to spread it amongst your peers would be a threat to national security and heavy commercial interests. You know what I'm saying? The slave trade and the business of the American colonization was big business, and they couldn't have this disrupted. And then you had new imports from other countries, and they couldn't. It would be a bad deal if they were to get educated and form a united front. You know what I'm saying? So that's how it is. But here's the thing: if you are of so-called Latin American or you're so-called African American, you should know this history, because it's part of your family lineage. Many of you, not all of you, but many of you. So particularly if you're Latin, because like I said, the Moorish people held the Iberian Peninsula for 800 years. Over the later centuries, they lost certain strongholds until they were finally able to be expelled. But if you're consider yourself a Latino, you definitely need to know this history, because many of the things that made Spain a dominant power, and the tactics they use, and how they were able to build such a large empire in such a short amount of time, came from the knowledge and the things they learned from the Moorish peoples, because that was who ruled over them. The Spain people like to claim their Visigothic heritage. They consider themselves Latinized Visigoths, but they also mixed in with Moorish people. So really, they were mulatto. At the time of them going around and colonizing the Americas, they were really mulatto. And many of Christopher Columbus' crewmates were people who were swarthy and dark. Somebody you would consider black, which I don't use to, use that term, because black had, it designates you as 3/5 of a person. Pretty much as part of a caste system, it means that you're chattel. So legally, I don't like to use that word. Colloquially, okay, I'll use it, whatever, to reach people. But if you're of African descent in this country, you're not black. You know what I'm saying? If you know what I'm saying, just call yourself American. You know what I'm saying? Take it how you want to take it. But you can also look at, for the history of the Moors, you can look at the iconography of the Russian Orthodox Church. A lot of them were swarthy and dark complexion. They're saints, like Saint Nicholas was a Moor. You had Saint Maurice of the Roman Empire, was a high-ranking knight. You know what I'm saying? That was a Moor. You know what I'm saying? These are terms and things that you can look into for the history. The Holy Roman Empire is definitely something you should look into, because they show pictures depicting the royalty of, of that empire several hundred years back as being dark and swarthy, fighting off barbarians. You know what I'm saying? Like Moors versus wild men or something like that, Mohr or something like that. You can look all this up on the internet now, because, this is, because it's open source. But yes, if you're Portuguese or Spanish or South American or Latin American Central, strong possibility you have Moorish ancestry. They did go into West Africa, like Mali, Nigeria. You have like the Berbers. They call them Berbers. The proper name for these people is Amazigh, but colloquially they were called Berbers. And then you have the Tuareg, which is a certain type of Amazigh. These people were also considered as Moors in times of antiquity. Some of them still claim that term, but not too many. Most of this stuff is old knowledge that you won't find now. There was a man named Noble Drew Ali who started the Moorish National Divine Movement in the early 1900s in this country, and he set up the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, trying to teach people this information. He was he was born of Cherokee descent, and he traveled to Egypt, and he came back here to this country and try to educate people. That, you also have the Nanticoke Moors of Delaware. These were a group of Native Americans who referred themselves as Moors, before the time of European arrival. And then you have the Washita, who some of them fell under that Moorish banner as well. But the Nanticoke Moors of Delaware, not a lot of people know about them, and they're clearly of a mixed phenotype. Some are dark, some are Caucasian looking, some are in the middle, You know what I'm saying? So this is stuff that you should look into. The Cimarrones and the Maroons of the Caribbean, that kind of stuff. Garifuna, Garifuna, you can look into that. So there's a lot of history. So take your time, you know what I'm saying? Take your time, but there's a lot, but there's not much I can say about this topic. That's all.